Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. I'm going to start this next topic of understanding enlightenment. What is enlightenment? And the first thing that I'm going to share with you guys about this particular topic is that it's challenging for the unenlightened mind to really understand this topic 100%. So while we're talking about this and I'm discussing this with you and sharing you details with what enlightenment is, you'll understand it more after our conversation than you do right now. But just understand that at the end of this conversation, you're not going to understand what enlightenment is 100%. It's kind of like if I was to sit here and explain to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like, but yet you've never tasted chocolate ice cream. You'll kind of have an idea of what chocolate ice cream tastes like after I'm done sharing with you what it tastes like, but you won't actually know 100% of what it tastes like until you taste it yourself. So it's the same kind of thing that I can explain to you what enlightenment is all day long, inside and out, backwards and forwards, and you'll understand it more. But as you're making your way closer and closer to it, that's where you'll really start to understand what enlightenment is. So I'm going to be gradually helping you to understand what enlightenment is more and more, and you'll know more about it after our conversation, but you won't know everything about it at the end of our conversation. So this is the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha, is to get to this enlightened mental state. And you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like about this mental state, and I'll explain it to you as we go. So first, let's just describe what it is. Enlightenment is a mental state that you attain during this life, or you can also attain it at death. But ideally, you would like to attain it during this life because then you can experience the rest of your life in this peaceful and joyful mental state. But you can also attain it at death as well. It's not a destination, it's a mental state that you're experiencing where the mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's a permanent mental state where you'll no longer experience any discontent feelings. The mind is concentrated, it's steady, it's unshakable. It doesn't matter what's happening in your life around you, your mind won't be shaken up by that. So like, for example, right now, if maybe someone close to you would die, maybe you'd really be shaken up by that, right? But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind isn't clinging and holding on and craving permanence. And you understand that it's normal that people die, and you can just maintain your gratitude and your appreciation for this person that was in your life. And rather than seeing it as a loss, you can see like, wow, I gained so much here. I was able to spend time with this person and they benefited me, and I was able to appreciate the time that we spent together rather than looking at it as a loss and that now you need to grieve or be sorrowful. So if the mind's holding on in this situation, yeah, you'll have a sorrowful, grieving experience, but you can actually get to a point where even something like death doesn't produce any kind of discontent feelings in your mind. And that takes training to be able to get to that point. So the mind is completely calm, it's completely peaceful, it's completely joyful. You'll notice that the mind is calm and relaxed, but yet it's attentive and alert, right? Because sometimes when we think about calm and relaxed, we think about like, just kind of like vegging out. Well, that's not the case with the enlightened mind. I mean, surely you're going to be relaxed and calm, but the mind will be crisp, it'll be attentive, it'll be alert at all times. But internally, the mind is completely calm and steady and stable. Also, as part of this enlightened mental state, an individual is not going to experience continuous rebirth, right? So this is a mental state that one's experiencing. The way that this is occurring is that the individual is purifying your mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. These are something I'm going to teach you on Wednesday morning. It's called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. You'll learn more about what this is when we get closer and closer to learning about that. But essentially, this is a high-level way of describing the pollutions in the mind. The Buddha discovered these 10 individual pollutions, which I'm going to introduce you to here in a moment. They're called the 10 fetters. But when we talk about these from a high level, they're described as craving, anger, and ignorance, or the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots. So when you purify your mind of these 3, that's what's producing the enlightened mental state. So while we call it attaining enlightenment, one way to think about this is that your mind is already enlightened, that there's the natural state of the mind is enlightened. But because it has all these pollutions in the way, they're hindering you from being able to experience those qualities. So when you peel that away, when you get rid of those pollutions, the qualities of enlightenment will shine through more and more. It's kind of like there's the sun and there's clouds that are blocking it. And as you start gradually gradually peeling the clouds away, the rays of the sun start shining through. And this is the same thing with the enlightened mind, that as you're peeling away this pollution, the rays or the brightness, the radiance, the joyfulness, the cheerfulness, the mind brightens up as you're peeling away this pollution out of the mind. The mind will experience where you're practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, rather than the opposites, which are craving, anger, and ignorance. So while this is a mental state, enlightenment is a mental state, the path to enlightenment, this is a purification of the mind. This is a journey to actively learning, growing, and training your mind actively on the path, removing the causes and conditions that are keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. So sometimes people describe enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. While there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state, I tend to not describe it that way because people kind of get a false impression of what enlightenment is. Because you understand what conditional happiness is right now. Like you experience happiness based on some condition. Like if your boss gives you a raise, you will be happy. Or maybe if your mom's going to come visit you today, perhaps you will be happy, right? Or if it's sunny outside, maybe you will be happy. You'll be excited. You'll be in this really excited, elevated state, right? But then when those things aren't happening, like if your boss came in and said you have to get laid off because the company's going through some financial troubles and they can't afford to pay you anymore, you're not going to be excited. You're going to come down into this sadness and this frustration and this agitation, perhaps, depending on what your mind's holding on to. Or if it's not sunny outside, now maybe you're going to be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. So this conditional happiness is where the mind is, up here. The happiness that you're experiencing in the enlightened mental state is where the mind is bright, it's cheerful, it's uplifted. It's called unconditional happiness, where you don't have to have any conditions that are met in order for there to be happiness. In the unenlightened state, it's kind of like if my mom and dad do this, if my boss does this, if the weather is this, if my bank account is this, then I will be happy. Right? There's like all these conditions. And now all those things being true is very limited, right? So the more conditions that you have, the less and less happiness that you can have. So by the time you wipe all of that clean, you can just be happy all the time, no matter what's going on in your day-to-day life. It's called unconditional happiness. So there's some people that describe enlightenment as this ultimate bliss or this ultimate happiness. And what people are describing here is they're typically describing what's called the jhanas. The jhanas are 4 preliminary phases that your mind goes through where there's enhanced qualities of mind before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. I'm going to show you the 4 stages of enlightenment, but before you get to the first stage, there's going to be these 4 preliminary phases that you experience. And we refer to those as the jhanas. When your mind first enters into the first jhana, there can be this ultimate bliss. And it's like night and day from where you were when you were off the path to enlightenment to where you're actually experiencing those jhanas. It's like, whoa, something major has changed internally within your mind. And you can notice this gradually. And sometimes it can actually be a bit sudden as well. Well, when people are in those jhanas, because it's night and day and they don't understand that they are in the jhanas, sometimes people think they're enlightened when they're experiencing the jhanas, and their mind actually isn't enlightened at that point. But what they're doing is they're describing what they're experiencing, thinking that it's enlightenment as enlightenment. So they will describe what they're experiencing it, and they thinking that it's enlightenment as ultimate bliss. This is where sometimes you will hear people say that enlightened beings still experience sadness or frustration or annoyment or things like this. I can assure you that this isn't true, but there's people walking around that thinks that they're enlightened. They still experience those feelings, and they're explaining what they're experiencing as enlightenment. So you'll hear people sometimes describe enlightenment as ultimate bliss, and I don't share it that way because that's what the jhanas are. That's not what enlightenment is. But there's plenty of happiness by the time you get to enlightenment. Your mind's always bright and cheerful and glad and uplifted at all times. So the advantages of getting to enlightenment is that your mind's going to be completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's a permanent mental state. It's physically impossible for you to experience anger, sadness, or frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, any of those feelings, it will be physically impossible for your mind to experience those, because the causes and conditions that are producing them have been uprooted, and your mind won't accumulate those ever again. They'll be completely out. It's kind of like you pull a weed. That weed can never grow again. If you pull it and you lay it in the sun and it burns and shrivels and dies, that particular weed is never going to grow ever again. It's the same thing, that when you uproot these pollutions out of the mind, you will never experience that ever again. It's a permanent mental state that the mind will reside in. So not only will you be experiencing these qualities, but you'll be experiencing this too, where the mind has a high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Because when you have these pollutions in the mind, it's not going to be performing very well. So when you uproot these pollutions out of the mind, you'll notice this focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory coming into the mind, because you've trained the mind and you've honed the mind. It's now performing optimally. You'll notice that you have deep wisdom about the world around you that other people don't necessarily have. And you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody and anybody around you. Right now, you might find that challenging, right? If somebody around you is functioning in a certain way, or you're looking at a certain thing, you might have difficulties treating people around you with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. But that's actually coming from your own mind. Sometimes people think that other people are causing that, but it's actually being caused by your own mind, and you can actually transform that. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you will be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody and anybody. Even when they're being disrespectful to you, you'll still be able to be polite and respectful to them. You might choose to walk away from that person or move on with your day, but nonetheless, you're not going to be bitter and harsh and hostile to that person. You're not going to be causing harm in the world. And because of this, you're going to see that your personal, professional relationships are at ease. They're really blossoming. Because when you're being bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive in your relationships, that stuff's all coming back to you, right? But if you can learn how to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, you'll notice that that's the way people will treat you more and more. It's not going to be one day or 1 week or 1 month that you're being polite and respectful. Now everybody's going to treat you that way. Even when you're enlightened, you're going to have the occasional person who's being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, but you're not going to be affected by that, right? Like the Buddha coming to where those individuals were, they were mocking him and joking him, but his mind wasn't affected by that, right? So you can get to a point where you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, and about 99.9% of the time, the people around you are going to treat you that way. But there's going to be the occasional situation where people, even when you're enlightened, are still going to be disrespectful and impolite, but your mind won't be affected by that. You can be completely peaceful and joyful in that situation. So you'll be able to conduct your relationships with ease. They'll really be blossoming, both personally and professionally. The way that you attain enlightenment is you focus on learning, growing, and developing on the path. And these are the core central teachings that you need. There's other teachings beyond this that you need in order to get to enlightenment, but these are the core central teachings to focus on when you're first getting started. And I'm going to essentially be teaching you all of these as part of this course. So there's the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts. I'm going to be teaching you all of those as part of this course. I'm not going to be teaching you the Brahma Viharas in this course, but I'm going to be kind of like alluding to them and kind of introducing them at one point. You probably won't even know that that's what I'm doing. With these, what this is these are 4 healthy mental states that you need to cultivate. This is loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. I have it in chapter 14 in the first book, and I teach it in all the other, some of the other programs that I share. But here I just kind of point to it at one point, but I don't actually teach it. But that's something that you're going to need as well. I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters here in a moment so you can understand what those are. Those are 10 pollutions in the mind. Then there's the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is a tool to kind of fine-tune your mind and bring it into the middle. And then you're going to need extensive meditation training. We're going to get that started during this week. And what you're doing when you're learning these teachings is you're intellectually examining them. You're investigating them. You're not believing them. You're not interested in believing any of the teachings. So you're intellectually investigating and studying and examining them. Then you reflect on them. You independently verify based on your own experiences in life. You start to independently verify this. Then you start practicing the teachings, integrating the teachings into your day-to-day life. And that's where the real transformation is happening. If you just understood the teachings intellectually, you won't get to enlightenment that way. You need to actually practice the teachings. And that's where the transformation of the mind is occurring in your day-to-day decision making that you're doing. So these are the core central teachings that you would need. And then there's teachings beyond this as well. And I'll share all that with you as you journey on the path. These are the 10 fetters here that I'm going to introduce you to. But do you guys have any questions on what enlightenment is or anything that I've shared so far? You have a question? Yeah.
If we're talking to people generally about training the mind and what we're learning here today, typically in this community, is this a universal language? Would they know what we're talking about? If we were talking to somebody who's been raised in the Buddhist teachings, would they know the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, or is this something that's been, translated for us in the teachings today?
Some people will know it and some people won't. It just depends on how much of a formal education they have in the teachings of the Buddha. So like here in Thailand, the average person hasn't studied the Four Noble Truths formally. But if you ask them, the average person, if you ask them like, what causes your feelings? They will know that it's their own mind that causes these feelings because the teachings have been integrated into their culture, right? If you ask them about the Eightfold Path, they're not necessarily going to know what that is because they haven't studied it formally, but they're practicing it to a certain degree, right? So by studying it formally like this, you're going to know it in a lot more detail. You're going to be able to practice it a lot closer. You'll be able to experience the results. Where here in Thailand, things are fairly peaceful for most Thai people because these teachings have been integrated into their culture and they just do it as part of their culture, but they don't understand it formally if you talk to them. So they have Thai words like Ariyat Sat Si. This is the Four Noble Truths. Mak Pad. This is the Eightfold Path. Sin Ha. This is the 5 precepts. So they have these words and they describe them in the same way, but they don't typically study them formally. But there are some communities, like I know a community down in Bangkok that has hundreds of thousands of people that's part of it, that they do study the original words of the Buddha in Thai in the same way that you're studying them. In that group is formally learning and growing and developing on the path. But the average person doesn't even have access to these teachings because it's so costly to print out all the 45 volumes of books. But this group down in Bangkok, they actually do the same like me. They give them away for free, essentially, to all the people. So there's more and more people now that are learning. But in the wider world, like in the Western world, it's very minimal. Like people, they might have heard of these things. They might be studying certain things, but oftentimes the translations are not very accurate and they're not studying with the dedicated teacher. So they're kind of off on their own and kind of misunderstanding a lot of things. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how I chanced upon you 18 months ago, is just in that learning. But in terms of that translation, is that in our book? Where would we find that translation? If I'm communicating with somebody in Thailand today and I'm here and I'm telling them that I'm studying the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, how would I find that to be able to translate and say this is why I'm here?
You mean like how would you explain it to the Thai people? Yeah, so what you can tell them is you can tell them that you're studying the Buddha's teachings, his original words. In Thai, they refer to it as Puta Vajana. That's what it means to study the original words of the Buddha. So the average person might understand that, but you can also use the word Dhamma because they understand the word Dhamma typically, because what they've done is they've adopted some of the Pali words into their language. This is one of the reasons why Thai people also don't typically study formally, because you need to have like a higher level of Thai language in order to study the teachings of the Buddha. It's not just like a common language. There's a higher level of language that you need, kind of like a medical language, you know. Same thing with the teachings of the Buddha. Buddha. So like if you talk, like sometimes people see me, I'm wearing all white, and some people are like, oh, are you going to ordain as a monk, or did you just unordain? Because usually when someone wears all white and they've shaved their head, they're either getting ready to ordain or they've stopped ordaining, and now they're kind of transitioning back into household life. And I say, oh no, I said, I'm a teacher of the teachings of the Buddha. And they'll kind of look at me and I'll say, oh, Buddha Vajana, I shared the Dhamma. And they're like, oh, okay. And then sometimes I need to go a little bit further and I'll say, oh, I teach the Arya Sasi, Makpad, Sinha. They're like, oh, okay. Thank you so much. And they're like really appreciative that these teachings are coming into the world, because they know that the teachings of the Buddha lead to this peaceful, better way of life, but they don't necessarily have the way to communicate it to Westerners. So they're very appreciative that there's someone in their community who is choosing to do that. So you could tell them that you study the Dhamma or the teachings of the Buddha, and they should understand that. That's more like a common way to explain it. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you, teacher. It's I don't know if you have a short answer, but it says an enlightened person will acquire deep wisdom of the world. Are you suggesting that's looking at
It's still on. Just
what's valued, or reassessing, recalibrating values? That deep wisdom.
That deep wisdom is about the natural laws that affect us, because as you've heard me share before about like the natural law of gravity affects us whether we're aware of it or not, and we ultimately cultivated wisdom about that, and that's why we now can navigate the world peacefully. Where when we didn't understand the natural law of gravity, we struggled and had difficulties. So there's other natural laws besides the natural law of gravity that is affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And when you cultivate the wisdom of those natural laws, you will have deep wisdom about how the world functions around you. Right? Can I share what we were talking about with the dogs and the animals? Okay, so she came up to me at break and she was explaining to me how she's been working with like animals, and that there's people around her that are really struggling with the death and the animals not being taken care of, right? So she was explaining how studying the teachings of the Buddha has been really helpful for her, because she understands the impermanence, that these beings are impermanent, that not everybody is going to take care of their animals, and that these animals are going to be reborn and they have another life and these kinds of things. And she's been able to, be less affected by this situation than some of her colleagues and some of the people she's working with. So when you have that deep wisdom of the natural laws, you will be able to navigate the world more peacefully and more joyfully, where other people with a lack of wisdom of these natural laws will really struggle. So in this situation, there's people that are craving every animal to be safe, or they're craving and longing, yearning for every pet owner to take care of their pet. And, while that sounds wonderful, it's just not going to ever happen, right? Because of impermanence, there's going to be animals that suffer, and that's unfortunate, and then they're going to experience pain and misery, and there's going to be owners of pets that aren't taking care of them. So when you have deep wisdom about the world, you will be able to navigate it more peacefully. And that's the deep wisdom that you'll have, is of these natural laws. You understand the universal truth of impermanence. And rather than dwelling with, oh my goodness, I feel so terrible that this animal has been brought in and it's so sick and malnourished and all of this, instead of dwelling there and allowing your mind to go into the sadness and sorrow, instead, I've got this being in front of me. They need health care. Let me provide that, and let me give this being what they need, and let me just focus on that. I don't need to form feelings based on what has occurred to this animal, because that's all in the past. I can just focus on helping this animal that's in front of me right now. And I don't need to form feelings or emotions over that, because that's just going to get in my way of making wise decisions to help this being. Let me just help this being and apply the care that I need to see if I can save its life. So this is the deep wisdom that you will have, and no matter what situations you're in, you'll be able to navigate the world more peacefully and actually be more beneficial for the people around you and the beings around you.
Thank you. Yeah, I after spending much time looking at my own way of attaching and being averse to different things, and looking at the teachings, the Dharma, I think my attachment is based on I can't separate it from a sort of a value thing. What I value, I might be attached to something which I deem to be value, which I later on went on to see that didn't possess the value I put to it. We could talk about material things and all that, many things. I wondered about the deep wisdom. Was it broader than that? Was it about looking around where, there's lots of people talking about, not being materialistic and things like that, but I wondered if that was some of the wisdom. I mean, the world's always going to have rich people and poor people, but to acquire wisdom about, on a broader sense of saying, it's why waste time trying to pursue all these things that we think will bring me happiness, when in reality it's just so temporal and completely and utterly impermanent.
Yeah, that's part of the wisdom.
In my life, in a day, it could be impermanent. I mean, it's...
Yeah, that's part of the wisdom that you gain. There's so many things like that. Like, we're teaching you how to purify your mind, and that's wisdom that you're going to be able to gather through learning the path. But there's also other wisdom that you're going to come to, because I never shared what you just shared. But that's true, right? Like we're going to need material objects in our life. We're going to need certain possessions to take care of this life and make sure that we can sustain it. But where we were maybe at other times in our life, where some of us might have been chasing money, we get to a point where we're like, that's not really what this life's all about. Even though there's plenty of people out there that are still doing that, and we might have been motivated to do that in the past. Now, at this point, after you learn that this happiness that you get from that is temporary and it's ultimately unsatisfying, you're just like, I just need enough to take care of myself. And it doesn't mean you can't be rich and be enlightened, because there's certainly people that are rich or enlightened, but it just means that that's not your focus in life, and you're not forming your emotions and feelings on your money. And that's where you would ultimately like to get to. So yeah, you'll have those different realizations and that different wisdom that'll motivate your life. And then there'll be other people, and this is where you can see that there's not just one right or wrong answer. There'll be other people that'll say, as an enlightened being, they'll be like, I would like to make money, because the more money that I make, I can use that to help other people, and I can practice generosity, right? And I can help other people through this money that I'm acquiring, but I'm not forming my emotions or feelings on it. So it's not like there's the set of values or set of beliefs that you're subscribing to, and everybody has to do that. That's not what these teachings are, but you're cultivating wisdom about the world, and now you're making decisions about your life. And one enlightened being is going to be different than another enlightened being, but their mind is going to be the same in terms of they're peaceful and joyful, but their lifestyle and the way that they're living can be completely different. But you'll see that they'll all be peaceful and joyful and kind and loving and respectful and compassionate and all of these kinds of things. Okay, let me get back to see if there's questions online. Remember, for those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Let me just check something here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters, because getting to enlightenment is to eliminate those 10 pollutions in the mind. The reason why the Buddha referred to these as fetters is that during his lifetime, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. What a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball. And that's how they would keep you confined to a certain area. They would just turn you out in a field and all these criminals would be there. Where today we put criminals in jail cells and prison cells and things like that, they would just attach a fetter to your ankle. So when he discovered these 10 pollutions in the mind, and he figured out how to eliminate them, he referred to them as fetters, because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state. It's keeping it confined, where it keeps experiencing anger and frustration and agitation over and over and over again. But when you eliminate this fetter, it's like, whoa, I'm free, right? I'm now liberated. Just like a prisoner is liberated from their fetter, you can get liberated from these fetters where your mind isn't bogged down and burdened with carrying around this pollution. And this is what actually produces enlightenment, is eliminating these fetters where the mind is no longer polluted. So ultimately what you would like to get to is where you know these fetters inside and out. But that's not where you need to start. Where you need to start is with the core central teachings. So what I'm going to do for you here is I'm going to just introduce you to these. But there's actually more and more classes, more and more retreats that I teach where I go into these in detail. But right now you just need an introduction to them. There's a retreat I teach every August where I spend an hour to an hour and a half on each individual fetter, right? Where I explain what it is, I explain the symptoms of it, I explain how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. But now what I'm going to do is just kind of introduce you to it a little bit, and you'll be able to see like, oh yeah, your mind has these fetters, because I'll just kind of touch on a couple of the symptoms that you'll experience. So this personal existence view, this is something we're going to be talking about tomorrow. What this is where the mind has confusion and misunderstanding, thinking that this body or this mind is you. The mind will cling to this like a self-image or a self-identity. If you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a pimple or a mole or gray hair, you started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that, that's your personal existence view. Or if you ever spilled something on your clothing in a social situation and you were embarrassed, that's your personal existence view, because your mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And the mind's confused and it thinks that this body is who you are. And it can only be happy if you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived in terms of this self-image. But then there's a self-identity that the mind will cling to too, where maybe you'll identify based on your culture, your ethnicity, maybe your sexual orientation, your job or occupation, your nationality, or something like this, where you'll cling to an identity, like I am an Aussie, or I am a Brit, or I am American, or I am Filipino, or I am this, I am a Brazilian, or any of this I am. It can be anything like your culture, your ethnicity, or any of these other kinds of things. And if you think that I am this, well, if people perceive you in an agreeable way, you'll be happy or excited. But if people talk about that thing in a negative and degrading way, and you identify with that as who you are, you're going to think they are talking about me, and now you might be ready to fight. Right? So now if you're in a restaurant and two tables over, they're saying all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. It's like, oh, they're talking about me. But then two tables over, they're saying something degrading or disparaging. And now it's like, they're talking about me, right? This is the personal existence view that the mind's clinging to. So this is a pollution of mind, because as long as you're holding on to this, you will continue to have ups and downs based on either agreeable contact or disagreeable contact. So we're going to talk about this more tomorrow. We're going to talk about the solution for this too, just a little bit. So this is personal existence view, where the mind's clinging to a self-image or a self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment. And you might have doubt right now. This is very normal to come to the path to enlightenment with doubt. Doubting whether or not this person even lived. Doubting whether or not these teachings will actually work. Doubting the community that you're part of and can it really help you? Doubting your teacher and their ability to be able to help you get to enlightenment, or doubting your own ability to get to enlightenment. But the way you eliminate doubt is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way you eliminate this doubt is through investigation and examination of the teachings. Because if you examine these teachings close enough and you penetrate into them and you start practicing them, you're going to see gradual improvement to the condition of your mind. And as you do so, this is where you'll get rid of your doubt, because you see the improvement to the condition of your mind. You see the improvement to your life. You'll get to the point where you have nothing but confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, this community that you're learning in, your teacher that has guided you, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. You won't be enlightened yet by the time you eliminate your doubt, but you'll have confidence that these teachings are leading you to an improved and better way of life, right? So you get rid of this doubt through investigation, examining the teachings, not through blind belief. So if you have doubt right now, which is very normal, you can actually harness this doubt, turn this doubt into an inquisitive mind, right? Where it's like, yeah, this isn't true for me, but maybe you're thinking, yeah, I do doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know whether they're true or false. That's a good place to be because you're not believing them. And now harness it and say, I would like to learn these and figure out whether they're true or false. So you can turn this doubt into an inquisitive mind. And that's what I suggest you do to really harness it. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. This is two parts to this particular fetter. What wrong behavior is there's certain moral conduct that you're doing right now that is unwise, and it's producing unwholesome results for you in your life. Like maybe you're being bitter and harsh and hostile or aggressive in certain situations. And as long as you're putting that out, that means you're causing harm to others, and this harm is going to come back to you. So what the Buddha teaches you is to shut down this unwise and unwholesome moral conduct. You're going to start learning how to do that tomorrow with the Eightfold Path. It's kind of like there's an oil pipe and it's spewing all over the world. Well, the first thing you're going to do is not go clean up the mess on the floor. You like to shut down the pipe. So as long as you're spewing unwholesome and unwise moral conduct in the world, it's going to just keep producing unwholesome results for you. So you need to shut down that unwholesome and unwise moral conduct. So in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha teaches you this natural law of what are the things that you could be doing that causes harm to others, and now this harm comes back to you. It's not rules or commandments. He's helping you to be able to see this natural law of cause and effect, that your decisions matter. And when you make decisions about your moral conduct, there's going to be consequences for that. And as you learn the wisdom of this, it's like, well, of course, you're not interested in experiencing unwholesome results. It's like walking down the beach and kicking up sand and it's blowing back in your eyes. You're going to learn to stop kicking up sand, right? So it's the same kind of thing that you would like to shut down this unwholesome moral conduct so you don't keep having this sand blow back in your face. That's the first part, is getting your moral conduct up to the level of the Eightfold Path. This wrong observances is where an individual might think that something like rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to lead to improvement in their day-to-day life, where what you would like to be able to see is what the underlying problem is that the Buddha discovered is a lack of wisdom in the mind. There's this unknowing of true reality that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. And there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that is going to fix that. Whether you choose to actually do those things or not, it's up to you. Those are choices that you make, because you might be hanging out with family, you might be going to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple or something like this, and you might be hanging out with people that are doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But in your mind, you need to understand that these things aren't leading to the cultivation of wisdom, and it's not leading to an improved and better way of life, because you're still going to be making the same decisions that you've always been making. It's the cultivation of wisdom that's going to lead to improvement in your life. So there's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you. There's no amount of strings that I can tie on your wrist that are going to help you to cultivate wisdom, right? So in order to get to this point where you've eliminated wrong observances, you will know in your mind that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship don't lead to improvement in one's life. Whether you do those things or not is your choice. And oftentimes people have actually eliminated this portion of this fetter before they even come to learn with me, because they might have done those things in other places and they see that it didn't lead to improvement in their day-to-day life. So they know that I don't do these things, and they actually are interested in learning because of that. So you might have actually already understood that these things don't lead to improvement. So this is wrong behavior and observances. What sensual desire is this is where your mind is longing, yearning through your sense bases, craving permanently agreeable contact. Your sense bases are your eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. The Buddha considers this a sense base, because you could be thinking about things in the past and forming feelings today about that. You don't have any contact through your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body, but your mind is thinking about something in the past or the future, and now you're forming feelings today based on that. So what sensual desire is where the mind wants permanently agreeable contact. And if it gets what it wants, it gets happy, excited, or elated, or some other pleasant feelings. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So if you're sitting at a traffic light and you hear music in the car next to you, and that music is agreeable to you, it's something that you normally listen to, it's like, all right, that's my jam. Like, yeah, let's go. Come on. Right. But then you go up to the next traffic light and somebody else has a different kind of music. Now you're frustrated, you're agitated because this is disagreeable sound entering your ear. It's not that other person that's causing your frustration. And it's not the music itself. It's the mind's sensual desire that it's craving permanently agreeable contact. And it sees things as agreeable or disagreeable. So this sensual desire is what we refer to as craving, desire, attachment, longing, yearning, wants, and expectations, where you're wanting permanently agreeable contact through the sense spaces, including like the nose too, right? Like say you walk past a flower shop and you smell a really beautiful, wonderful smell. It's like, wow, that smells great. But now you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer. And you might be repulsed by that. It's like, right? This is because of the sensual desire. So you will learn about this more and more and more, and this is what you're working to eliminate from the mind, so you don't keep favoring and opposing things, like grabbing things that are agreeable and pushing away things that are disagreeable, because this is just going to allow your mind to continue to have sensual desire. So this is what the Buddha is helping you to eliminate, among other things. And when you have that sensual desire, when you're not getting your sensual desires fulfilled, that's where your ill will can arise. Because when you're getting what you want, when your sensual desire is getting fulfilled, you'll feel pleasurable. It'll feel so great to hear that wonderful music, right? It'll feel so great to smell that wonderful smell. But when you're not getting what you want, that's when the anger and the hostility and the bitterness will arise up in the mind. And this is where the mind will tend to push people away, be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or you might put your expectations on them. You'll become unskillful when your ill will is arising, right? Like that person pulls up to you with that music that you don't like. You just kind of scowl at them and be upset with them. Maybe you'll even wind your window down and tell them to turn off their music or something. Who knows what you might do, right? This is because of that ill will that you become very unskillful in that situation. Then those are called the lower fetters, by the way. We call them the lower fetters. Then there's something called the higher fetters. This is desire for form and desire for formless. I'll describe these together because they're very similar. What desire for form is where you have a desire to exist in one of the form realms where there's physical form, like the human realm or the animal realm. These are the form realms. There's physical form. Maybe you want to live in this world, meaning you want to keep coming back over and over and over again. Or you maybe want to be reborn as an animal. Maybe you think it'd be cool to be reborn as a bird and to be able to fly around in the sky or something like this. Who knows, right? That's a desire to exist in the world. And then there's a desire for formless, where you have a desire to be in either the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, which is like ghosts, or the heavenly realm. You know, it's very common for people to have a desire to be in heaven. They think that, that's like an eternal life, that they're going to be in heaven for the rest of their life or for permanent eternity. But you'll be able to see everything around you is impermanent. This heavenly realm is not permanent, but people oftentimes have a desire to exist there permanently. And there are people who want to be in hell as well. It's very rare, but there are people that have that, right? So if you have a desire to exist and continue existing, that's what desire for form and desire for formless is. By the time you eliminate these, you will no longer have a fear of death. Sometimes people have a fear of dying, but by the time you eliminate these, you won't have fear of death. But if you're holding on to this life and you want it to be permanent, as you're getting close to death, you will have fear of that death. So by the time you get rid of this, you'll no longer have that fear. Then there's something called conceit. Conceit is like measuring and comparing yourself to others, putting yourself above them or below them, having arrogance or pride or boastfulness. This is just going to get in your way of having harmonious relationships, because when you go into environments like that where you're talking down to people, they're not going to like that, right? They're going to just kind of push you aside. But if you do that in other situations, you're going to be putting yourself below people. Like maybe you go in to talk to your boss and you feel below this person and you feel all shaken up from this. Where what you would like to get to is that you just view everybody equally. If you have this thought of you being superior or inferior around certain people, when you go into a social setting, for example, you'll be trying to figure out who's above me and who's below me, right? And now you talk to one group of people that are below you in one way, and you talk to people who are above you in a different way. And now your mind is constantly trying to figure out, which is very burdensome, who's above me and who's below me. And this is very tiring. Where this comes from is our animal existences. When we were in the animal realm, we needed a pecking order, right? In the human realm, we don't need a pecking order. But in the animal realm, we needed it. Because if we were in a pack of wolves and we didn't know who the alpha male and alpha female were, we wouldn't learn how to hunt. We wouldn't learn how to survive. If we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was when we were elephants, we wouldn't have known where the watering holes were. We wouldn't have known where the food is. We wouldn't know the migration paths. If we didn't know who was above us, we wouldn't have survived as an elephant. So as an animal, we needed to have a pecking order. But then when we come into the human realm, we retain that. And now we start functioning where we're looking for this pecking order amongst us human beings. And now it just drives people away from us. So this conceit, also sometimes referred to as ego, will hinder you from being able to have rewarding and sustaining and fulfilling relationships, because you're not going to be able to see the love and the kindness and the compassion of other beings. In fact, your ego will oftentimes project itself on other people, and then you will read that coming back as their ego, when in reality it's your own ego that is happening there. So you're going to learn over time, not in this course, but you'll learn how to eliminate this, where you can be humble. And being humble doesn't mean you put yourself below people. It just means that you're humble, that you don't be boastful and put yourself above people, right? So you can still be respectful to people without putting yourself below them. That's an important thing to know. Then there's something called restlessness. This is like a confused, overactive mind. If you've ever sat and you like bobbed your knee a lot, or you like tapped your fingers a lot, this is because the mind's overactive and it's restless, and it's coming through in the body, right? So the mind is the boss, the body is the employee. So the body is just going to follow whatever's going on in the mind. So if you're like tapping your knee or tapping your finger or tapping a pencil, this is the over action of the mind. The overactivity of the mind is the restlessness that's in the mind. And this is normal for people that have this, but ultimately by the time you get to enlightenment, you will eliminate that, where you can just be completely still and calm and steady. You don't have that overactivity in your mind. Then the thing that's keeping all of this stuff in place is the fetter of all fetters. It's oftentimes referred to as ignorance. I tend to use the phrase unknowing of true reality, because this word ignorance is like a derogatory word. It's a degrading word. I would never refer to someone as ignorant at this point in my life, right? And a Buddha wouldn't talk to someone that way either. So people are translating his words into English, and they're typically using words that they're familiar with. So if you're an unenlightened being translating the words of a fully, perfectly enlightened being, you might interpret it in a way that the Buddha actually didn't say, right? So a better way to think about this is the unknowing of true reality, the misunderstanding, the confusion, the misperception. This is the lack of wisdom that the mind has. Because the mind doesn't understand what it doesn't understand, it continues to struggle. It continues to have difficulties. The mind doesn't even know that these 10 fetters exist in the mind. The mind doesn't know the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. The mind doesn't know the natural law of karma. The mind doesn't understand all these different things. So because of its lack of wisdom, all these other fetters continue to stay in the mind. So getting to the elimination of ignorance is to cultivate wisdom. But this is more than just an intellectual pursuit. If you understood the teachings of the Buddha intellectually, you haven't eliminated your ignorance yet. You actually need to practice the teachings where you're actually making wise decisions. So like when we were children, we grew up knowing and people taught us that it was unwise to use drugs and alcohol, for example. And intellectually, we understood that it was unwise. But because of our ignorance, we might have still done it, right? Because we still were making decisions based in this unknowing of true reality, the harm that this is going to cause us by choosing to ingest these substances, right? So you can understand something intellectually, but still have ignorance because the mind isn't functioning through the wisdom of the teachings. So the way that you eradicate the ignorance is through learning, growing. You need to examine the teachings, yes, to know them intellectually, but you need to practice the teachings. That's where the mind is being transformed. So these are the 10 fetters, okay? Do you guys have any questions on any of the individual fetters? Yep.
Is there a reason why some are higher fetters and some are lower fetters, or is there a distinction between the two? The numbers.
Yeah, there's always a reason for everything in the teachings of the Buddha. So it's good you're asking, right? Because it might not be apparent. So what this is like a personal growth plan and helps you to kind of plot your course of how to eliminate these, right? So for example, this personal existence view and conceit are both what we refer to as the ego. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, but you wouldn't be able to eliminate your conceit without first having eliminated your personal existence view, right? Like you can't eliminate the arrogance, the boastfulness, the pride if you still think that this body is you and this mind is you. So you need to eliminate that first before the conceit can actually be eliminated. You're going to need to eliminate the sensual desire in order to eliminate the ill will, right? So you're going to need to learn about these and practice them. You're going to need to eliminate the doubt in order to get to the elimination of some of these others. So you're going to see in a minute how they're laid out, where you move through the stages of enlightenment as you're eliminating these particular fetters. So they're referred to as lower and higher because it's like a personal growth plan that you need to understand that this is kind of the sequence of approaching these and work towards eliminating them. Mm-hmm. Okay. You have a question? Yep.
In terms of 8, conceit, and so I always come back to this. This is an area that's of particular interest to me. So I keep coming back to the example where I work in a highly regulated industry. Some may perceive my teachings as ego, having ego. How do I qualify whether I have ego or I don't have ego in order to be able to manage this? Is it my ego teaching people about the regulatory requirements of a certain aspect of their role or occupation, or is it me, or is it them perceiving me as having ego in the role that I fulfill in teaching them regulation?
Okay, so no matter what you do, even when you're enlightened, people are going to perceive you however they would like to perceive you. Oftentimes what we're doing in the unenlightened state is we're looking out at the world through our own pollutions of mind, and now the world looks very dirty, right? So someone's own ego can be in their mind, and they can be looking at you and thinking that you have ego, when in reality it's coming from their own mind. So this personal existence view is getting to the point where you don't have any worry about how other people view you and are perceiving you. You need to get to the point where you understand that some people are going to think you're the most loving, kind, warm, gentle person ever, and there's going to be other people that absolutely despise you and hate you. Even the Buddha, right? Same thing. Because of that impermanence. And when somebody hates you, that's a reflection of what's going on in their mind. Or if somebody tells you, you have ego, that's their ego. Because going into someone's life and giving them unsolicited guidance and just telling them those kinds of things, that's their ego. Thinking, I know what's right and this person is doing something wrong and I need to tell them about that. I need to go into their life and tell them what I think they should or should not be doing. That's their ego that's doing that. So the first thing is that people are going to perceive you in any number of different ways. And if you have that in your mind, you're going to need to let that go and not even have a worry about how other people perceive you. Because once you learn and practice this path, you'll know through the condition of your mind, as peaceful and joyful as it is, that you're practicing the wise way, or what the Buddha refers to as the proper way. He calls it the wise way, the proper way, the straight way, the upright way. You will know that without any ego, because you just know that your mind is peaceful and joyful for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You haven't had any discontentedness. So you'll know that your mind's enlightened. But in terms of whether you have ego and just choosing to teach, like safety and stuff like that, that by itself doesn't say that there's ego in there. It's the methods and the practices, right? If you walked into a classroom with your chest all puffed out and I'm going to teach these people how to do something, and I know you probably don't do it that way, right? But that would be the ego, right? So, but somebody can perceive you that way because they really don't want to do what you are teaching them. They want to be complacent. It's kind of like the wild animals in the forest. They see the animal trainer coming and they just want to run away, and they just want to poke holes at the animal trainer. They don't want to talk to this animal trainer. They don't want to deal with this person. They want to go frolic around in the forest. But now when somebody's coming in and explaining to them like, hey, you guys need to do it this way or that way, they don't want to be told what to do. They just want to be complacent for themselves. So you're automatically going to be a target in that field because they're trying to be complacent and you're trying to raise them up to here, and they're here. And they don't want to come up to that level, right? So they're going to try to peg you with all kinds of perceptions that their mind has. But just because they have that perception doesn't mean that's true reality. Just because somebody thinks that you're arrogant or egotistical doesn't mean that that's the case. So just choosing to share safety concerns and safety policies and best practices doesn't mean that there's ego in there. It's a matter of how it's being taught, and the methods and the way of communicating, if you're looking down on people or you're looking up to people and things of this nature. But in this situation, they can peg you with any number of different things. I've had a student come here before and he said that he thought I had ego because I sit in a chair. He's like, every teacher that I've ever learned from has been teaching on the floor, and because you sit in a chair, you have ego. So this is their mind craving permanence, right? And he didn't even choose to ask me. He didn't say, David, why do you sit in a chair? Oh, well, if he would have asked me that, then I would have explained it to him. For 15 years, I used to teach on the floor. I used to sit on the floor and teach from there. But I got in a motorbike accident in 2019, and I couldn't cross my legs for extended periods of time. I have to kind of stretch them every once in a while. So by being in a chair, I can kind of stretch my legs every once in a while. So this is that person's ego projecting on me, thinking that because I'm in a chair, I want to put myself above him, when in reality, it has nothing to do with that whatsoever. So you can't just look on the external surface and say that that's ego or that's not ego. It's what's going on internally in the mind. And as long as you know you're not putting yourself above people and you're doing this out of deep concern and loving kindness and compassion for others, you know that that's where you're coming from. But other people will try to peg you with ego all the time because they're trying to knock you down so that they don't have to do what it is that you're suggesting to them. And that's a way for them to stay complacent, because they really don't want to do that work to bring their practice up to a certain level. All right. So now that you guys are starting to... Oh, you have a question? Yes, sir.
So that,
yeah, it's already on.
So that person, who had the ego, is that? I just want to make sure, is that desire for formless? Then that person would be the desire for formless.
That's the conceit.
Oh, that's a conceit. Okay.
Yeah, the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing. One of the things he shared with me is like, I was a monk for 15 years and I've been Buddhist for 30 years, and I've done this and I've done that, and when I meditate, my mind does this and my mind does that, and I know that you have ego. But he was boasting about all these things about himself before he even got to the point where he said, you have ego. I was like, okay. So you could tell that this person has ego, but that's not your goal, to go around and judge people and figure out who has ego and who doesn't have ego. But I just gave you guys that as an example because this individual came here one time. This was many years ago. But you'll have these things, right? You know that you have all the kind-hearted nature in the world. You know that you're just here to help people. You're here to do one thing or the other. And people will try to constantly knock you down, right? Because the last thing someone in the darkness is interested in is somebody getting to the light, because that is a constant reminder to them that they're still in the darkness. So the darkness is going to try to pull you down and keep you down with them, because then they can feel comfortable that, I don't have to do any work here. I can feel comfortable because everybody's doing the same thing as me. But once somebody starts to become more wise and more wholesome, a better and better individual, that's a constant reminder for the other people that their mind isn't doing that. And now the way that they think to solve that is to pull this person down and be with us again. Whereas if we let that person keep ascending, now we can observe that our mind isn't there, and that means we have to do something about it. So you'll see these things with people in all parts of the world, where people will try to knock you down. Even sometimes our families will do that, try to pull us down, because they're the last thing they're interested in is seeing you become more peaceful and more joyful. Even though they might tell you that they love you and they respect you, oftentimes people's minds are just holding on, and they don't want to see people create betterness in their life, because their ego is threatened by that, because then they feel like you're above them. So even though you're becoming wiser and more peaceful and more joyful, you should never look down on the people who aren't doing those same things. There's no judgment in these teachings whatsoever, because it just harms your own mind when you're judging other people.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, and if you could turn that off, because that one sounds like it has a little bit of feedback on it. All right. So now that you guys are starting to understand the fetters a little bit, and remember, this is just an introduction to them, just to kind of help you see, like, yeah, your mind has these fetters, right? Because this is the underlying thing that everything else the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate these. But you're not going to necessarily know exactly which ones you're eliminating until you go further in the path. But you need to know the foundational teachings to kind of gradually start cleaning up all of these different fetters. But over time, you're going to be targeting these more and more. And as you're targeting these and you're eliminating them, you're going to be moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment. This is called stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. So I'm going to introduce you to these 4 stages of enlightenment and how an individual would move through these 4 stages of enlightenment. And then there's something called a Buddha, which isn't a stage of enlightenment, but is a unique and rare individual. So what a stream enterer is this is somebody who's gotten to the first stage of enlightenment. And the Buddha would refer to this person as a stream enterer, because just like the log enters the stream and it's going to eventually get to the ocean, it's just a matter of time. It's the same thing that is true for someone who's entered into the first stage of enlightenment. They will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time, either in this life or some future life, a maximum of 7 rebirths that they're going to actually get to enlightenment. This is called a stream enterer. The way that you get to this stage of enlightenment, there's multiple things that you need to accomplish within your own mind, but you would have eliminated the first 3 fetters of personal existence view, doubts, and wrong behavior and observances. So once you're in this stage of enlightenment, you're going to notice that your discontentedness has significantly diminished. It's just a mere fraction of what it once was when you were off the path to enlightenment. And you'll know that your mind is in that first stage of enlightenment. But this isn't something to be arrogant and boastful about. You're not going to put it on your Facebook page that you're a stream enterer, right? You're not going to call up mom and be like, hey, mom, guess what? I am a stream enterer. Aren't you proud of me, right? That would be the conceit and the arrogance. This is a personal growth plan for you to understand. You don't go around and tell other people. You don't get a merit badge or anything like that to prove that you are a stream enterer. This is just for you to understand your growth and your development on the path, right? So that's the first stage of enlightenment. The second stage of enlightenment is referred to as a once returner, because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back to the human world one more time, and you will get to enlightenment in that life. You've already eliminated the first 3 fetters, and you've thinned out number 4 and 5. Thinning out a fetter means that it's not as strong and dominant as it once was. So for some people, as they're progressing and they're thinning out this central desire, they start noticing that their interest in sex starts to diminish. For example, certain central desires start to kind of diminish, where it's not as enthusiastic for you anymore. You're not gaining all this pleasure from these certain types of things. You're starting to get more and more to unconditioned joy and unconditioned happiness. You're no longer finding your source of happiness external, right? So as somebody is progressing, they'll thin out number 4 and 5, where you're not as angry, you're not as hostile, you're not as bitter anymore as you maybe once were younger in your life. So these 2 fetters will gradually diminish. And when you're in this second stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness will be diminished as well, even more so than when you were in the first stage of enlightenment. So an individual can actually get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having a sexual relationship. So in this situation, you can do all the other work on the path to enlightenment, but you're still going to have some frustration and agitation and annoyance when it comes to sex, for example. Like if you're having sex, you'll be happy, you'll be excited, even for a few hours or a few days afterwards. But there's going to be some situations where you want sex and you can't get it, and you'll be agitated and frustrated. That's that central desire. But oftentimes that's one of the things that people see that is happening is your sexual interest starts to decline. And that's why it's important to eliminate your personal existence view, that you don't define who you are as a person through your sex life. Oftentimes people think of it that way. Like if they're knocking it out in the bedroom with a partner, they feel good about themselves, right? So if you are wanting to be perceived by others a certain way, it will be very challenging to progress this way. So this central desire is something that's in the mind, and you'll notice that it'll slowly diminish as you're getting into this second stage of enlightenment. And that's where the peace and the joy will be increasing more and more. Then there's something called a non-returner. If you die in this stage of enlightenment, you don't come back to the human realm. You're reborn into the heavenly realm, and you will attain enlightenment from there. That's not the ideal, but getting into this particular stage of enlightenment, you're experiencing discontentedness like once every 3 months. Maybe once every 6 months. And the discontentedness that you're experiencing is very minimal. It's very infrequent, and it's very insignificant when it's occurring. That it's maybe lasting 30 seconds, maybe a minute at most, and you're able to cut it off and eliminate it right away. Your mind can become complacent here because you're experiencing discontentedness so infrequently that you don't stay dedicated and diligent to overcoming it, that you almost kind of ignore the discontentedness. So you need to stay diligent in this stage of enlightenment, because your mind can kind of become a bit complacent there because you're so infrequently, and the discontentedness is so insignificant that the mind can become complacent. So you would have eliminated all 5 of the lower fetters: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. But you are still experiencing discontentedness here because there's still some other fetters to take care of. We refer to this fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened, as an arhat. This was a term that was used during the lifetime of the Buddha to describe someone who's completely purified their mind. Today, we would probably just call this person an enlightened being, or someone who's in the fourth stage of enlightenment, and things of this nature. They have eliminated all the 10 fetters, not just the lower fetters, but the higher fetters as well. Desire for form, desire for formless, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. The Buddha describes this person as beyond training, that they have so much wisdom about the path that they fully culminated that wisdom to the complete purification of their mind, and now they are beyond this training, that they no longer need to train on the path to enlightenment because their mind is just functioning through those teachings all the time. The way you might think about it is it's like a computer, that you're upgrading your operating system, right? When you first are on an old operating system, it's kind of like an old archaic operating system. But then when you upgrade your operating system to your computer, it feels kind of cumbersome. For a couple of weeks, you got to figure out, like, where did they put those icons? Where did they put those settings? You can't quite find it. You might even be a little bit frustrated that you can't accomplish the same things that you once were able to accomplish. But then slowly but surely you get up and running on this new operating system and you're like, wow, this is so much easier. They should have done this to begin with, right? And now you're just functioning with ease on this new operating system. So it's the same thing that once you purify your mind of all these fetters, your mind has essentially been upgraded. And now you're functioning with ease because your mind has fully eradicated the ignorance. The mind is deeply wise about these teachings. And now you're beyond training at this point. And you won't be experiencing any discontentedness at all. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You'll notice that your mind hasn't been angry or even the slightest bit annoyed when you're in this stage of enlightenment. And that'll be multiple years that you're going to see that occurring. And life will just be peaceful. It'll just be joyful. Everything around you, your relationships will all be harmonious. So do you guys have any questions here on the 4 stages of enlightenment? Yes, sir.
Are they're cumulative then? So as that comes back to what you were talking about before, as the lower and higher fetters. So for example, you to get to a level that was on the previous slide, you wouldn't be able to, if you were doing really well with restlessness, for example, that's doing really well with restlessness would be dependent on the other fetters that came before restlessness. Is
Right.
that correct?
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to get rid of restlessness until you eliminate sensual desire, because the whole thing that's keeping your mind in that restless state is the sensual desire, because the mind's pulling you in all these different opposite directions. So the mind can't be calm, it can't be steady. So that's why the Buddha's putting them in this particular order, because this is the order that you need to eliminate them in. But that doesn't mean you can't work on these other ones, right? Like the conceit. You can start working on that right now, right? So it's not like you wait until one is eliminated before you start working on the other one. You work on all of these simultaneously, so that if you ever see arrogance or pride or measuring and comparing and judging others coming up in your mind, which is from the conceit, even now, you can choose to cut that off and eliminate it out of the mind. And then slowly but surely, you gradually wear this away, where you're gradually wearing it away, little by little by little. Okay, so we had already talked about this a little bit, which is what is a fully perfectly enlightened one, or a Buddha, where I shared with you guys that a Buddha is an individual who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless people will get to enlightenment after their death. These are the 3 primary criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. This is not a stage of enlightenment. This is an actual individual who is an arahant. They have gotten to the 4th stage of enlightenment, but they've done it in a unique way, that they've done it by themselves. And then they dedicate their life to sharing those independently discovered teachings, and then they preserve them so that other people can get access to them as well. Also, an individual who's a Buddha, they have a profound memory to be able to understand countless amounts of wisdom from their current life and their previous lives as well. This is what actually allows them to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That in your mind, you have like a limited capacity, like 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte of memory, right? And now when you're experiencing things in your day-to-day life, you probably remember the last 5 or 10 years fairly well of what's been going on in your life. But when you're experiencing new things, you need to delete these files that happened in the past. You need to delete those old files in order to store new files. And that's why when you look back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories about what happened in your childhood, because you had to delete those files in order to store these new files. The individual who's going to get to enlightenment as a Buddha, they have a deep, profound memory. They have an unlimited capacity in their mind, that they remember countless details about their current life and their past life too, their past lives too. They have a crisp, direct recall of exactly what was occurring at any of these given times, and they bring forth that wisdom to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's what allows them to do that, because they're able to remember these countless details from their current life and their past lives as well. Then the individual who's a Buddha can quickly determine the condition of someone else's mind, and then they're able to offer that person teachings that are going to help them to be able to progress on the path to enlightenment. But they only do that with their students. They don't just kind of like, they're not at a restaurant and just like, hey, you're talking unwisely there. You need to stop doing that, right? That would be conceit if you just stepped into somebody's life to do that. But a Buddha, one of the reasons why they're so successful at helping many people get to enlightenment is that they can observe the quality of their student's mind and then help them with teachings that are going to help them. So they can actually observe the mind of other people and then provide them guidance that is actually able to help them. Then the last thing here, one of the last criteria, is that a Buddha is a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, they're also practicing those same things as well, because they understand that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So an individual who's a Buddha will function through their own teachings, and this is a way to actually teach their students. So they're not going to teach one thing and then do something differently. They're actually going to be living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. So this is what a Buddha is. Okay? And then to understand that the mind is not enlightened, this is one of the ways that I teach. I explain to you what something is, and then I explain to you what something is not. One of the ways that you will know that your mind is not enlightened is that you will be experiencing conditioned feelings, discontentedness. Here, there's pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. And when I say that an individual who's enlightened will no longer be experiencing happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. Sometimes people are like, hold on, David, hold on a second. I don't know if I'm interested in this enlightenment stuff if I'm not going to be experiencing that. It's important to understand that these are conditioned feelings, that based on some condition, you will then be happy. Because in this situation, you can only be happy when those conditions are met. Like if it's sunny outside, then I will be happy. If my bank account balance is here, then I will be happy. So your happiness is actually limited when you have conditional happiness. And that happiness is going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. Because as soon as you base your happiness on some object, that object is not permanent, so that means your happiness is not permanent. What the path to enlightenment is guiding you towards is permanent happiness, where it's unconditioned. There doesn't have to be any condition met. That when you wake up in the morning, you're happy. You look outside, it's sunny outside, hey, you're happy. You go take a shower and you come out and it's raining, you're still happy. You weren't happy because of the sun, so therefore when the sun is gone, you're still happy. You can maintain your happiness. So an individual who's gotten to enlightenment will no longer be experiencing conditional feelings. They will be experiencing unconditioned mental qualities, that the mind is always cheerful, it's always glad, it's always bright, it's always uplifted. Then one of the ways to know that your mind is not enlightened is if you have a craving or a desire to go around and tell people that you're enlightened. This is one of the best ways to know someone's not enlightened, is they're going to stroll up to you. They're going to be like, hey, by the way, don't tell anybody, but I'm enlightened. Right? It's like, whoa, all this ego, all this arrogance. Like, what do you want from us? Do you want us to bow down to you? Do you want admiration from us? What do you want? Right? Because if they still want something, if they're still boasting, then their mind is not enlightened. Right? So if you have a desire to tell other people you are enlightened, your mind is not yet enlightened. So you're going to need to be humble and just know for yourself and just walk through the world with your wisdom and a smile. That's it. That's all an enlightened being needs to walk through the streets with, just a wisdom and a smile. If you're so peaceful, go be peaceful. You don't need to come around here telling us that you're enlightened. Just go be peaceful, right? So this person isn't enlightened yet if they're going around bragging and being boastful that they're enlightened. And then lastly, if your mind is complacent, where you're lacking motivation, you're lacking initiative, enthusiasm, or willingness to do something, you'll know that your mind is not enlightened. Where sometimes you might be chasing, you might be so excited and thrilled, but then other times you're kind of feeling dull or lethargic. You'll know that your mind is not enlightened, because the enlightened mind is going to be bright, it's going to be uplifted, it's going to be cheerful. You will get sleepy, but you won't get tired. You won't get exhausted. Like right now, when you go out in the world, if everything's going your way and you're getting all your cravings fulfilled, you might say, wow, this was a great day. This was the best day ever. But then if you go out into the world and your cravings aren't getting fulfilled and you're noticing that you're feeling painful feelings, you might come home and be exhausted and tired. And you say, this was a hectic day. This was a horrible day. That's because your cravings aren't getting fulfilled. But when you get rid of all of that, every day is a wonderful day for an enlightened being. Every single day is just an absolutely wonderful day. So that's where I don't say that it's a life of suffering, because it can be a life of rewarding and fulfilling and satisfying things when you train your mind to do so, right? So if you're noticing this complacency or this dullness, this lethargic state, if you're noticing you're exhausted and tired, feeling like you're carrying around a burden on your shoulders, your legs are really heavy and you're just kind of dragging yourself through the world, this is because of the mind is unenlightened. But when you get to enlightenment, you won't have that same experience. Okay, so any questions on any of this? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break here for lunch. It's just a little bit after 12. And if we could get back at 1:30, I'll be able to teach you guys the Buddhist chanting. And then I'm going to do a meditation with you guys too, where we integrate the chanting and the meditation together. So it's been really wonderful spending the morning with you guys. I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your interest to learn. And if you'd like to take a lunch break and come back at 1:30, or if you'd like to hang out here, totally up to you guys. Enjoy your break, whatever you do, and then perhaps I'll see you guys at 1:30, okay? Be well. Okay, take care. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.